Hello, welcome back to Teen Story Share. This week we are continuing Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, which we've already read the first 2 chapters of. I'll link those below in case you missed them. And we're going to jump right into Chapter 3. Chapter 3. I retched into the bowl between my legs, stomach lurching with the jostle of the mule and box. I told you traveling by lodestone was a bad idea, Kathleen snapped at Wu-In as she emptied my sick bowl out the window. We should have taken camels. Lodestones are nasty powerful. She's never been exposed to magic before. She was raised in an invisible manor house, Wu-In pointed out dryly. She'll be fine. Besides, from the look of it, the kid would have been sick however we traveled. It was my first time in a mule and box, in anything with wheels. After leaving Bakina House, we had crossed 2 realms in 2 weeks. By mule, camel, or river barge, the trip would have taken months. But we had traveled by lodestone, a powerful, hazardous magic that dissolved bodies and reformed them leagues away. Ports were scattered throughout Eretzar, guarded by Imperial soldiers. Whenever we passed through them, Kathleen had forced my face beneath a hood. "Stay down," she had grunted. "You're the lady's spitting image." I didn't understand why resembling my mother was dangerous. In fact, in the thrill of adventure, I often forgot all about the lady's wish. Her lethal words grew hazy as I witnessed marvels from my books and scrolls. Town? Market? Mountain? Lake? Forest? In a world so big, what were the chances of meeting that boy in the portrait? After the first lodestone crossing, I had vomited my breakfast onto Kathleen's boots. The Imperial Guard warriors had warned against traveling by lodestone more than once a month, but Wu-In had insisted on 2 crossings a week. After the 4th crossing, my left arm vanished. I had nearly fainted in terror, and the limb flickered a few times before deciding, at last, to return. Wu-In had relented then, switching us to a mule and box. We endured hours of stiff, dusty travel, stopping only to sleep at mud-brick village inns. I inhaled ginger soup to settle my stomach, before collapsing onto a straw bedroll, too exhausted to dream. Today, the lodestone nausea had finally begun to subside. After retching into the bowl, I felt much better, and I leaned curiously from the mule and box window. Our destination of Oluwan was coastal, a land of ferny palms and orange groves, with long, warm days and cool, rain-kissed nights. My heart thrummed as the unfamiliar landscape rushed by. Bumpy plains of green and gold, dotted with lakes and palm trees. I gulped the morning air. It tasted like citrus and salt water. "Little demon," hissed Kathleen when she noticed me. She tried to pull me back, grappling with my blue cotton wrapper. "For Am's sake, someone could see you, brat. Stay down." "I won't," I said, gasping in laughter as the wind whipped my beaded braids. "I'll never stay away from a window again." "You won't live to see another," Kathleen threatened, managing to wrestle me down at last. "Not if you keep making a spectacle. You're a secret, brat. You're not supposed to exist." I frowned. "Because my father's an Eru?" "It would not matter if your father was the devil," Kathleen said. "To the Emperor, your mother will always be a greater threat." I pressed her, but Kathleen refused to say anything more. So I sulked, scooting away from her and joining Wu-In on his side of the cramped sitting space. I still hadn't forgiven Wu-In for kissing the lady's hand, but at least he left me alone. Half the time he hardly spoke at all, except to mutter sarcastic remarks, or to curse when his birthmarks glowed. "Those pictures hurt you, don't they?" I frowned up at him. "Why didn't the map go away when you came back from the breach?" Wu-In stiffened. "The map will disappear when the nightmares do," he said sourly. I knew better than to ask more questions, but curiosity gnawed at me. How old had Wu-in been when his parents gave him up to the Abiku? What had the underworld been like? Once, at an inn, I had pretended to sleep as Wu-in gazed through our second-story window. His shoulders had trembled, and after a moment I realized he was sobbing. As if fleeing from monsters only he could see, he threw on his silk cape and leapt from the window. Then he soared above the dark rooftops, his lean body silhouetted against the moon. "Can all Songlanders fly?" I asked him, jostling his shoulder in the mule and box. His smooth brow furrowed, displeased that I knew his secret. "No, it's my hallow." "Hallow?" "My birth gift. Only those with hallows may serve the lady. All of us have one." All of us. The phrase made me curious. How many friends did the lady have? "Do you have a hallow?" I asked Kathleen. She nodded. "I can change the appearance of whoever I please, including you, though I think the lodestones have jumbled your insides quite enough already." She scowled out the window, growing thoughtful. "My gift comes in handy, since Muish people gawk at Ethokens. At least in Olawan City, no one cares if I'm striped or spotted." "Show me," I begged, and suddenly, instead of Kathleen, a second Wu-in sat across from me. I jumped, grabbing the first Wu-in's arm in fright, but now he was Kathleen. "Greetings, lady's daughter," droned the illusion Wu-in, flipping its straight jet hair. "It is I, your sullen nanny prince. Watch as I brood over my tragic childhood." Illusion Kathleen rolled its eyes. "Very funny." Kathleen shimmered back into her own skin and restored Wu-in's face. "Prince?" I echoed, frowning. My tutors had made me memorize the living members of every dynasty on the continent, and I'd never heard of a Prince Wu-in. Queen He-sun of Songland had only one heir, Crown Princess Minja. "I didn't make it onto many records," Wu-in said flatly. "It's something they avoid when you're born cursed." Our box neared the city gates. The roads grew broad, and the air rang with hoofbeats and voices. A highway ran alongside the broad Olaroon River, and cargo-laden barges floated up and down the current. Drums and laughter sounded as men rode and sang. Now Kathleen hid me more than ever, but I managed to peek at the horizon, and my heart raced with wonder. The skyline swelled with golden domes and ghostly white high-rises. Mist shrouded the towering city walls, and the Olaroon River curved around the city like a steaming blue serpent. When the roads grew too crowded for our mule and box, we switched to a tasseled palanquin. I peered breathless through the gauzy curtains as runners carried us through the gates and into the city. Streets and lofty skyways bustled with merchants and pack mules, jeering children and haughty scholars, storytelling priests, and street-side hair braiders. Hawkers sold everything from cola nuts to caftans, caged sprites to muling hyena cubs. Obsidian tributes to Inoba the Perfect glittered in every square. The oldest and most wealthy Olawan families, Kathleen told me, were known as blue bloods. Blue because their skin was so black it shone like precious cobalt. But as the Arid Empire had grown, so too had Olawan City. Now it sported every complexion under the sun, every tongue, every spice and fabric. Curry, lavender, and cayenne pepper mixed curiously in the air. Tartan wool from the north, silk from the south, and traditional wax-dyed cloth from the center realms hung side by side on clotheslines. Music and dialects from 10,000 miles apart melted together in one deafening din. "Don't let her see the watching wall," Kathleen barked as we passed deeper into the city. Wu-in obeyed her, seizing my protesting limbs and planting a hand over my eyes. I still managed to peek through his fingers, but I didn't understand what I saw. A wall several stories high cut through the city. Murals of crowned figures stared imposingly from the plaster, one of whom I recognized, Inoba Kunleo, the handsome, broad-nosed hero of whom statues were sculpted all over Olawan. Painted close around him were other men and women, dressed almost as grandly as the emperor. On impulse, I counted them. 11. Why did that number strike a chord in my memory? The number hung over my head, like a cloud threatening thunder. Wu-In didn't let go until the streets grew quieter and the houses grander. Among the sound of trickling fountains and satiny murmurs, plump Olawan blue-bloods glided out of villas onto palanquins. I noticed with curiosity that Bikina House had been modeled after Olawan mansions. White walls and red roofs sparkled proudly in the morning sun. "This is Ilioba," Kathleen murmured, both reverent and wary. "District of the Emperor, and all who can afford to live near him." On a green terraced hill, the domes of a sprawling palace rose to the sky. "And that," said Kathleen, "is on Ilioba, where the Emperor lives. That's your last stop, little demon." "Why?" I asked, but by then I did not expect an answer. At the palace gates, our palanquin was checked for weapons. Black flags 10 stories tall spilled over the sandstone walls of An Ilioba. The flags were emblazoned with the imperial Kunleo seal, a swirling gold sun encircled by 11 moons. "Business," grunted a guard. Kathleen pointed at me. "She's one of the candidates." We descended from the palanquin, and the guard waved us into a vast, noisy chamber with yellow suns chiseled onto the marble floor. Children from every arid realm filled the room in various states of undress. Some scrubbed in tubs and were inspected for lice. Others ran drills with wooden spears, or recited poems from scrolls, or plucked frantic scales on instruments. Some even preened before hand mirrors, smiling and simpering. "An honor to meet you, Imperial Highness." Most of them wore black tunics, pinned at the shoulders with polished sun and moon clasps. Palace servants in brocaded wrappers supervised the children's preparations, and once each boy or girl was deemed suitable, for what I didn't know, guards ushered them into a line which wound dizzyingly around a stone spiral staircase. "Age," a clerk with a large book and quill droned, looking up at me from a low kneeling desk. 11, Kathleen replied. "Same age as His Imperial Highness. Her name is Tarisai, and she hails from Thwana." The clerk peered up at me suspiciously. "Are you sure? She might have a Sawanian name, but she looks Oluwani." Kathleen prodded me in the back, and I yelped and berated her. My Swanian accent convinced the clerk. He nodded to a gaggle of palace servants who seized me. I fought back, clinging to Wu-In's hand, but he whispered, "You are on your own now, lady's daughter. We can't stay." "What's going on? What will these people do to me?" He looked uncomfortable, but squeezed my hand. "You'll be fine," he muttered. "We will always be near, even when you can't see us, and you have been prepared." Prepared? For what? But then Kathleen and Wu-In were herded away by guards, and my last tie to home, to Bikina House, to everything I knew, disappeared. 5 pairs of hands removed my clothes and scrubbed my skin with plantain ash soap. My hair was washed with sweet-smelling water, combed and twisted with shea butter until every coil shined. They pinned the flowing black tunic over my shoulders and draped me with a sash representing my home realm. The cloth was rich indigo, like the Swanian sky, and patterned with elephants and herons. Within hours, I had joined the file of children on the winding stairs, our sandals slapping on the stone. Curiosity tempered my fear. I'd never stood close to people my age before. A girl with enormous hazel eyes paced ahead of me. Her hair and neck were covered by a sheer red veil, and camels patterned her sash. I guessed that she was from Blisseed Valley, a desert realm of nomadic herders and craftsmen. She twisted a gold ring on her smallest finger, singing absently to herself. Sleep, daughter, today you will leave me. Tonight I cannot sleep. Sleep and never forget your mother. Her voice was like a grown woman's, deep and jangling, wrapping around me like a thick wool robe. Immediately I relaxed, but when I yawned, she stopped singing. Sorry, she said, and flashed a smile. Mama always says I should be more careful. That chant puts my sister Miriam to sleep in a camel's wink. I sing it when I'm afraid. It helps my heart remember home. You must be cold, I said politely, nodding my head at her veil. She laughed. This is my prayer scarf. Blasides are people of the wing, and we all wear a covering of some sort. It shows our devotion to the storyteller. My tutors had not brought me up in one of the Erit religious sects, though I knew there were 4. Can all wing people do what you do? Magic with their voices? She snorted. No, and it's not magic. I just remind bodies of what they need most. It's my hallow. A birth gift, I murmured, echoing Buin. Of course. Hallows are a requirement for all candidates. I hope mine is enough. I wonder... She shot an anxious glance up the stairwell. I wonder if Mama was right. Maybe I never should have left our caravan. Screeches pierced the air, and suddenly guards clambered down the staircase, grappling with a blond boy with the palest skin I'd ever seen. It is not fair! It is not fair! Unhand me! The boy railed in a thick Nantish accent, gargled and breathy. Unless he had traveled by lodestone, it would have taken him almost a year to reach Olawan. The cold gray realm of Nantes lay within the farthest reaches of the Erit Empire. I did not even get to meet His Highness. I will send for my father. I was born for this. It is not fair. The Blaside girl snickered behind her hand. Looks like someone didn't pass the first trial. And that's just an interview. The hard part comes after. I stared at the Nantish boy as his screams grew distant, and clutched at my indigo sash. The sensation of several pairs of child-sized hands leached from the cloth. Recent memories. Within the last month, dozens of other Swannian children had worn the sash, donning and removing it with shaking fingers. Had they been excited? Frightened. The cloth did not tell. What are they going to do to us? When we're tested? Oh, the Blaside girl waved a hand. Nothing too dangerous. The real trouble is if they like us. We never get to see our parents again. Not till we're grown up. What? I hollered. Several other children turned and whispered. The Blaside girl shushed me, looking embarrassed. Of course we can't see our parents. Council members sever blood ties and swear loyalty only to the prince. Didn't anyone tell you? At my terrified expression, she softened. What's your name, Swanna girl? Mine's Kira. She extended a hand, which I gaped at, and dimpled. No point in being shy. If we both pass the trials, we're stuck together for life. I'm Tarisai, I said after a confused pause, and my hand slid into hers. The touch, warm and calloused, felt so natural I didn't want to let go. I stole a portion of Kira's story, just for a moment. 2 smiling older faces flashed into my mind, their prayer scarves worn and smelling of cinnamon. Mama, Baba. Kira had parents who loved her. They hadn't wanted her to come here. She had chosen this strange, chaotic place for herself. Why? I wanted to ask. But we had reached the staircase landing. 2 intricately carved doors rose up before us, guarded by warriors on either side. I had seen very few wooden doors in my life. In warm arid realms, cloth door flaps allowed airflow, and therefore were more convenient than wood, unless one was very wealthy, private, or both. One of the warriors nodded brusquely at Kira, and she gulped as the door swung inward. Before disappearing through the opening, she pressed my hand. "Don't be scared, Tarisai," she murmured. Her gaze was starry. "It might be hard at first, but if they pick us, think of what we could learn. All the books in the world. No lodestone port closed. Just think, we'll practically rule the world." Then she was gone. Hours could have passed before the door creaked open again, and it still would have felt too soon. The guard nodded at me. When my legs didn't budge, I was unceremoniously pushed inside. The door boomed shut behind me. I stood in an antechamber hung with purple tapestry. A cluster of men and women sprawled on divans and high-backed chairs, murmuring softly. Matching gold circlets gleamed on their brows. Their accents were as different as their complexions, but they gave the impression of a family, or something closer, much closer. When I entered, they turned their heads in eerie unison. I shrank into the entryway shadows, expecting them to rise as one, like a multi-headed beast. But only one of them moved. A man with broad nostrils and deep laugh lines sat in the room's center, enthroned on a cushioned chair. The wax-dyed cloth of Oluwan, geometric patterns of red, black, and gold, draped his solid frame. A mask hung from a cord over his chest. It was too small for anyone to wear, and I wondered at its purpose. It was black obsidian, carved in the shape of a lion with a mane of 12 stripes, each shimmering a different color. The man reclined, examining me. "Well, who is this?" His baritone was cheery, intended to put me at ease. His crown, an upright disk of solid gold, encircled his face like a rising sun. Over his head 3 words were carved into the back of his chair. Kunleo, Oba, eternal. In a violent flood, years of lectures filled my head. This was Olugbade Kunleo, the Olugbade Kunleo, from my tiresome months of genealogy lessons, the direct descendant of Inoba the Perfect, the king of Oluwan and high emperor of Eretzar. My tongue turned to lead. "Don't be afraid, little one," sighed the emperor. "Wash your hands in the bowl. It is custom." A gilded basin stood at my elbow, smelling strongly of herbs. The basin was engraved with pelicans, the sacred avatar of Am the storyteller, and the bird's eyes gleamed with sapphires. I dipped my hands in the water, which was amber like the enchanted pool near Bekina House. My fingers tingled and I wiped them on my tunic, shrinking back into the shadows. "Good," said Olugbade Kunleo. Then as he squinted from across the room, his face drained of cheer. "Come into the light, child." There was something familiar about his voice, a melodious timbre that drew me to obey without question. My feet advanced. The light from a tall, unglazed window fell full across my face, and the room gave a collective gasp. "Am's story," one of the courtiers swore. "She's her spitting image." Another courtier scoffed. "It can't be. Not even the lady would be reckless enough to send us her child." "You knew my mother?" I asked. The strangers jumped as if surprised I could speak. Why was everyone always so afraid of me? "I'm Tarisai," I said awkwardly when their silence continued. "My home is Bekina House, Swana. Excuse me, but why am I here?" Another echoing pause. "You tell us," the emperor replied dryly. I don't know, Your Imperial Majesty," I stammered. "My guardians brought me to Oluwan, and my mother said she'd come for me when—" Emperor Olugbade leaned forward, his tone ominously calm. "When? What?" "When the time is right," I whispered. That's all she said. Olugbade tented his hands, considering me with a stillness that made my palms sweat. Then he laughed, a startling bark. His eyes crinkled at the corners. Come here, Tarisai of Swana. I crept forward, staring warily at the Emperor's companions, some of whom placed hands on their weapon hilts. The Emperor smelled of palm oil and oranges. The folds of his wax-dyed robe rustled, and the obsidian mask dangled from his neck as he leaned down to my ear. Here's what I think, he said evenly, like a father telling a bedtime story. I think that the lady sent you to kill me. But first, she would have you kill my son, Crown Prince Ekundayo, heir to the imperial throne. What? I stared at him in horror. Your Imperial Majesty, I don't want to... I think you should try, he said, drawing a knife from his robe and thrusting it into my hand. Go on, try to kill me. I trembled, but he clenched my fingers around the knife hilt and brought the blade to his neck. Try, he repeated, with a smile that warned me not to disobey. The blood drained from my face. Squeezing my eyes shut, I put pressure on the blade. It didn't budge. At Olugbade's urging, my hand pressed the knife hilt harder, then with all my strength. But the knife did not touch the Emperor's neck. A hair's width of space lay between the blade and his skin, a thin, invisible barrier that no amount of force would make yield. Olugbade chuckled, releasing my hand. The knife clattered to the floor. Do you know what this is, Tarisai? He asked, gesturing to the lion on his chest. After my reluctant attack, one of the stripes in the lion's mane had begun to pulse with lurid light. It's a mask, I stammered. Is that why I couldn't hurt you? No, Olugbade laughed. This mask is merely proof of my right to rule Eretzar. Proof of the power inside me. Every stripe in the lion's mane is a death I cannot die. The only people in Eretzar who may kill me, he said, the only people in the entire universe are here in this room. He gestured to the group of 11 men and women who clustered protectively around him. I will not die until this body crumbles with old age. That is the power of the Ray, child. That power filled my father before me, and fills my son now. Only a Raybearer's council of 11 may kill him. Such is the divine protection of heaven, and none shall thwart it. He smiled tightly. Not even your clever lady. Alright, next time we read chapter 4, and that will be our last chapter of this book before we move on to a new one in February. So I hope you have a great weekend, and thanks for joining us. Bye!